If you have a desire to become a better version of your current self, then this podcast is for you. I share with you helpful thoughts, tips, and stories surrounding fitness and self-improvement which you can apply to your life today. So for those of you that want to take control of your life, to learn, to grow, to become that which you desire most, I am your host, Connor Malone, and this is the pursuit of constant improvement. Over the past 4 years, I have read or listened to 86 self-improvement books or audiobooks. Now, the reason I know that specific number is because simply, I counted how many I've had on my Audible that I've finished and how many I've got in person that I've finished. What I'm going to be doing in today's episode is sharing with you my top 3 favourite books, but most importantly, my top lessons from each of those books. Now, what I want you to take from this episode isn't just these incredible lessons that I've learned, because see, with every single book and audiobook I listen to, I collate notes on each of them. Because one of the best way to learn is to repeat things. So when I listen to something or I read something, I'll highlight it and I'll put it into notes on my phone, because by writing things, by talking about things and trying to teach them, that's how we learn better. So that's one of the core things that I've done in my self-improvement journey. I'm going to be sharing those important lessons that I've learned with you. But as I was saying here, I don't want this to put you off reading these books. I hope that the things that I talk to you about today, you'll find super interesting. You'll think, wow, I want to read that book. Please don't think of this as the sense that I've picked out the best parts of the books and that is the only beneficial parts. There is so much beneficial facts and information in all of these books, and it will be better discovered when you actually read them yourself. So I hope this gives you the inspiration to pick up one of these books or audiobooks and either listen or read them. But at the end of the day, don't just take my word for it. Go and read it from there, because you'll interpret it differently. In fact, 2 of these books on this list, I have read or listened to 2 or sometimes 3 times, 2 of the books. And the reason for that is really well explained by this quote here. And it says, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." And what that means is, for example, our outlook on the world changes. So if I read a book today and I read it a year later, my perceptions on the world and even different words will have changed. So I will get different things from that book. So that's something I want you to take away from today's episode, is that when you read books, try and reread the same one. See if you found the book super valuable. Reread it a year later. I guarantee you'll pick up things that you would have first missed. And that is one really important thing that I've learned from reading, and one thing I wanted to share with you. Now we'll get straight to it. One of these 3 books, this is my favourite book of all time, and it is The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Now, before I go into the lessons from this book, some of the most profound things that I've learned from this book, which has changed my life, literally changed my life. It's changed the way I perceive the world. It's changed the way I act in this world. It's completely changed my life, and that is no exaggeration. I need to explain to you one thing first, and that is what the book actually is. Because The Meditations wasn't a book that was intended for publication. It wasn't meant to be sold in shops or anything like that. It was written by Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor. He was a Roman emperor during the time when Rome was the most powerful empire in the world, and he was at the forefront of it. So basically, he was the most powerful man in the world, of the richest empire in the world, of the biggest army in the world, all of these things. And what we often find with previous leaders of nations and empires is that they become complacent. However, that is one thing that Marcus never became, because he was known as a philosopher king. He was a Stoic philosopher, so throughout his time being the most powerful man on earth, he studied philosophy, which makes all of the things that I'm about to share with you so impressive. Because in today's world, we search up like, oh, what's Elon Musk's routine? What does Jeff Bezos think of this? What does Ronaldo think of this? All these people we look up to because they're so powerful and they're so incredible at what they do. We want to look up how they view the world and what we can do to be like them. But I see no better role model in life than Marcus Aurelius. He had all the temptations of the world. He had all the power a man could ever have, which is what most men strive for. And with it, he remained a philosopher. And he chose to study philosophy and become the epitome of self-improvement. That was his life. He was the philosopher king. So I hope that slightly better explains what this book is about. It was a journal. Okay, as I said, it wasn't intended for publication. So what he was doing is he was journaling to himself. At the end of every day or first thing in the morning, he was writing notes to himself based off things that he was experiencing. This was 2,000 years ago. And you might think, oh, well, it's not going to be applicable today. Wait till you hear some of this stuff I'm about to read you. He wrote this 2,000 years ago. And he wrote it so beautifully. He never intended for anybody to read it. He wrote it in Greek, which was his second language, and he wrote it so, so well. So I'll get into this, but just bear that in mind, that if you want to go and read this book, I would highly recommend that you understand more about it first. You understand the man that was writing it, you understand a bit about him, and it will make it so much more profound what you're reading. Now, the first thing I'm going to go over, a lot of these are quotes, because that's what the meditation is. It's a collection of quotes. He didn't write a story or anything like that. It was small thoughts that he had throughout the day, which are now often dissected as quotes. And the two quotes I'm about to talk about are focused on what you can and what you can't control. This is one of the most important things I learned from Marcus Aurelius, was this idea of the dichotomy of control, which is a Stoic idea that there are some things in life that we can control and most things that are out of our control. We can always influence things, but there's only one thing that is always within our control, and that's how we respond to things in life. So throughout life, a lot of things will happen which you don't want to happen. But see if you think that you can control that, you'll agonise yourself over it, saying like, oh, why did this happen? Why did this? Whereas if you understand that it was out of your control, and the only thing you can do now is deal with it in the best way possible, that's an incredibly powerful lesson. And that's what these two quotes summarise. Now, the first one is this: the wise man accepts his pain, endures it, but does not add to it. Now, what he's saying here is a wise man, a smart man, I suppose you could say, is somebody who accepts pain. They don't complain about it. See if shit happens to you, you don't sit and complain about it and say, oh, why me, why this, why that? Because then what happens is you add to your pain. Because people get confused when shit happens to them. They're like, oh, they'll complain and they'll get themselves into despair and they'll keep repeating and repeating it. You are making that worse by repeating that to yourself. Whereas as Marcus says, a wise man would accept that pain, he would endure it, and he does not add to it. He doesn't make himself suffer, because believe it, that is what you're doing. You're making yourself suffer. It is a really, really important one there. The next quote is again on the idea of the dichotomy of control, similar to that. And he said, you have control over your mind, not outside events. Realise this and you will find strength. And that just summarises the whole idea of the dichotomy of control. And that is that things will happen to you in life, but the only thing that you have control over is your mind and how you respond to those things. You don't have control over outside events. Let's say you're playing a sport. It could be a football game. It could be a game of darts, right? You can put your best effort into that because you can influence it. You can put your very best effort into it. But see the end result. What will happen will happen. And what you need to do is realise that the end result is technically out with your control. You can, yes, influence it. But what happens at the end of the day. Whereas you'll get people that will bitch and complain about it if they lose. Whereas you'll get people that will endure that loss, as he said in the first quote. And that is the wise man. Because you realise, listen, it's happened. I can't change that now. I can learn from it. But now all I can do is respond to it. I can respond to it in a good way going forward. That's one of the most important lessons I've learned, not just from Marcus Aurelius and his meditations, but from Stoicism in general. And that idea is the dichotomy of control. And those two quotes emphasise it really well. Now, next quotes from the meditations is going to be about gratitude. It's basically, gratitude is obviously being grateful for things. And I feel that these two quotes really well explain that. Now, bear in mind, these quotes were written by a guy who had experienced the death of 5 children. He was living through a war. His empire, his nation were at war. There was a plague ravaging the country. In fact, it was the worst plague of his time. It killed millions of people. Literally, he was living for a very difficult time. He wasn't living in his palace all the time. He wasn't with all his riches. He was he was at battle. He was in the war fronts. Now, he wasn't fighting, but he was guiding his armies. So make it very clear, he was, as we say today, in the trenches. Literally, he was commanding from the front. He wasn't sitting in a big shiny palace directing them. He'd went through loss. He'd lost 5 of his children. He lost other people close to him, philosophers that taught him throughout his whole life, tutors that taught him throughout his whole life. This man endured. This man had been through pain. He'd experienced it, but he had endured it. And he'd done these things to help practice gratitude and keep him grounded from that. And these two quotes really summarise it. What he said was, when you rise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. And the most important thing with this is these are things that people take for granted. To be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love. All of these things, you have the potential to do all of those every single day. And he reminded himself of that. And you can imagine, if you remind yourself of that all the time, you'll start to pick up a more grateful and optimistic attitude and perspective of the world. Because so many people they look at the negative, they're straight drawn into the negative, and then that just encapsulates the rest of their mind, that everything they think about is negative. Whereas you need to remind yourself what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, and to love. And to me, that's the epitome of gratitude. And that's something that the most powerful man in the world practiced on a daily basis. Now, another one on gratitude, he said, treat what you have as non-existent. Look at what you have, the things you value most, and think of how much you'd crave them if you didn't have them. Because see, in today's world, we can get so tied up on what we don't have. Like, oh, I don't have enough money, or I don't have the job I want, or I don't have this friend or this business, or whatever it happens to be that you're tied up on. What are you going to expect, but your mindset to be negative if that's all you're focusing on, what you don't have? What do you have in abundance? You have access to water, you have access to food, you have access to shelter, you're most likely in good health, your family is in good health. You have all of these things. See, everything else, treat it as non-existent. It doesn't exist. You treat the things that you have, think of the things you have, and think of what the world would be like if you didn't have them. How powerful is that? The people you love most, see if you think to yourself what you would do in this world if you didn't have them. It makes you think, oh, fucking hell, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to be alive. I'm so lucky to have these things. So again, that is a complete perspective shift from focusing on the things that you have, not on the things that you do not have. And this was 2,000 years ago. Like, people think, oh, well, it was a different world back then. No, it wasn't. Human behaviour is the same. Humans act the same way. And that leads us on very nicely to this next aspect, which these two quotes really, they emphasise emotional control to me, which the Stoics were so good at. And this next quote to me epitomises expecting rudeness. That's the way I emphasise it. And it's one of my favourite quotes from the Meditations. It's the first quote in book 2. And what he says is, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil. Now, what he's saying here is he's expecting in the morning that he's going to deal with people who, to put it bluntly, are going to be arseholes. Because there's so many people in the world that people are rude to them, people don't hold the door open, people don't say thanks, people don't say please, whatever, and they get themselves in a tizzy. They're like, oh, I can't believe that person done this, done that. You're tormenting yourself. Whereas you should expect rudeness. You should expect people to be ungrateful and jealous and horrible to you. That is the world we live in. People are like that. So if you change your perspective to expect that, then you're not going to be as affected by it. You're not going to sit and complain. You're not going to go home to your parents or your friends or your loved ones and say, oh, you'll never guess what so-and-so said to me, whatever. Whereas you could have the perspective, well, you know what? I know people are arseholes and I'm expecting them to be arseholes. I'm just going to deal with it and move on. That is a powerful perspective. In fact, Marcus speaks about it in the Meditations as life as a boxing fight. Right? Imagine you're being in a boxer. Imagine two boxers. One of them goes both, jabs him in the face. And the other guy says, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? You just hit me. Why'd you hit me? And he starts complaining. That's the rules of the game. See, in boxing, you get hit. You're not going to complain about it. Whereas see, in life, shit happens. People are rude. People are ungrateful. That is how life works. So you need to learn to expect it. So if you think of it in a boxing fight, you get jabbed in the face. What do? Do you sit there and complain and get jabbed again and jabbed again? No, you learn from it. You slip the jab and you return. That's what we call anti-fragility. So it's not just resilience, but you learn from things and you adapt and you get better because of it. That's a powerful mindset to have. So again, you expect these things to happen. You expect bad things to happen. You expect people to be rude. You expect shit to go wrong because unfortunately, that is life. Life is somewhat a game. It is like a boxing fight. You're going to get hit. Things happen. Shit happens. Learn to expect that and you won't be as affected by it. Because as soon as you begin to get yourself in a mood and get yourself all tormented about other people being rude to you, you're doing yourself more damage. That is not them. You're inflicting that damage upon yourself. And that is what Marcus was saying there. And another thing he said was when it comes to anger, he said, when you start to lose your temper, remember, there's nothing manly about rage. It's courtesy and kindness that define a human being and a man. That's who possesses strength, nerves and guts, not the angry whiners. Who are the people that you look up to as men, as real strong men, as men that you would want to be like? It's people who don't complain, people who don't get really easily angry and things like that. They have emotional control, which both of those quotes teach you to have. Now, I could go on all day about the Meditations, but I'm going to go on to book 2. which is the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is basically a guide to wealth and happiness, I believe he explains it as. Now, Naval is an entrepreneur. He's basically a modern day philosopher. I don't think he calls himself that. I don't think any modern day philosopher would, but he very much is. There's podcasts. He's been in the Joe Rogan Experience, the best GARE podcast I've ever listened to. I'd highly recommend you go and listen to it. There's like 10 million views on it. And he doesn't do many podcasts or things. So basically this book was written by somebody else and it was a collation of all his works. So quite similar to the Meditations actually. He didn't intend for this stuff to be published as such in a book. Now, I'm going to batter through these ones because they're quite short, but they're super powerful lessons from here. They're not necessarily quotes, but they're really important life lessons that I've learned. So limit your desires, because when we pick up too many desires in life, we start to suffer with them all. Naval believes that it's okay to have one desire and to suffer over that because that's like your life's purpose to do something. But when you have too many desires, you want this, you want that, you want more things, you're just going to suffer. Because he says that the desire is a contract with yourself, but basically that you make and you say that you're not going to be happy until you get that. So if you desire to have something, it's like a contract saying, right, I'm not going to be happy until I get that thing. And that's not a good way to treat life. So basically what he says is limit your desires and it'll make you happier, because this book is all about happiness, all about building wealth, and he's got some super powerful things on that. The next thing he talks about is the modern struggle, which is to not become addicted, because we live in a world where social media, fast food, all these technologies, everything is just thrown in our face, advertising, everything is given to us in abundance, everything is trying to gain our attention. It's your job not to become addicted to those things, and to again limit your desires and limit what you try to consume. And that's actually one of the other things that he says, is basically like try and put your focuses into set things. Don't be pulled away in loads of different directions. Again, have fewer desires and have fewer addictions. If you are going to have addictions, you choose what those are. Okay, you don't be pulled away in every direction. Another one is what I call the ultimate goal. He doesn't define it as that, but I believe it's the ultimate goal, and it's a quote from Naval. He says, "A calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. These things cannot be bought, they must be earned." Because he talks about two things that somewhat conflict each other, wealth and happiness. Some people believe that you can only have one and not the other. But again, that's up to your opinion. He believes that you can have both. And with them, these are things that you cannot buy. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, you cannot buy a calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. They must be earned. So I believe that's a really powerful thing. It's the ultimate goal in life, and you do not need wealth for that. Would it help? Maybe. But at the end of the day, a calm mind is a very difficult thing to achieve. A fit body, a house full of love, those are incredible things to aspire to achieve in life, those things. So I just think that's the ultimate goal. Another really interesting thing that he says is how to escape a funk or a rut, as we would call it. And what he says is use meditation, exercise, and music to reset your mood. Now, what he does then is, let's say you're in a bad mood, you're in a rut, you can't get out of bed to do things. Now, this is going to work to an extent, okay? This isn't going to be completely transformational. But if you're in a little bit of a run, a little bit of a funk, see, meditating, clearing your mind, exercising to stimulate endorphin release and changing the actual way you feel through physical work, through physical labour, and then music, because that can change your emotions. All these things can change your emotions, which can inspire a little bit of action. And I found that really applicable. I've tried all of them. When I've been in wee ruts, when I've been in wee funks, try to listen to certain music and stuff like that. And it alters your mood. Exercise alters your mood. Meditation alters your mood. So by using these things, what he says is to escape that funk or rut, you use one of these three things, and then you choose a new path to commit emotional energy for the rest of the day. So what he means by that is if you're in a rut because you're working on a project and you can't progress any more of it, go work out, listen to some music, go and meditate, change the task you're doing if possible, and that will get you out of that rut. And I've found that to be so helpful, because I have tried that. It sounds great, but I have physically tried that, and I believe that it works really, really well. Now, the last book I'm going to talk over is a book that I believe, if you're just getting into self-improvement, is a great place to start, because with self-improvement, your first book is really important. It needs to inspire you, because if you're like me, you're maybe not a natural reader, but to consistently read, you need to be inspired at least some extent. You need to want to learn more. The book is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Now, if you've only ever seen David Goggins online, you've probably seen him calling you a bitch through a camera. He's sitting screaming at you running on a road. Please, if you've never read his books, read his books. It is incredibly inspirational, not just the story he's been through, but the things he's learned. He doesn't strike you as the most intelligent guy in the world, but honestly, these lessons are so applicable to real life. It's incredible. Now, again, I'm going to go through each of these lessons. So first of all, callous your mind through repetition. That's what I picked up from it. Now, if you've ever had calluses before, they're basically hard bits of skin at the bottom of your fingers. If you lift weights or if you've played golf or a racket sport, you'll have had them before, these hard bits of skin. Now, they become hard through repetition, through exposing them to external stress, like a barbell rubbing off your hands, and they become hard. He believes that the mind can start to change and adapt the same way. It calluses. Not physically, it doesn't physically callous, but basically the more we do things that are difficult, the better we become at doing them. And I've experienced that firsthand. The more I've done difficult things on a smaller scale, the more I've repeated them, the less difficult it's necessarily felt, and the more your perspective change on how difficult that thing actually is. So again, callous your mind through repetition. Do things that you're uncomfortable with on a regular basis. That is callousing your mind. The next one is armor the mind before the day starts. One of the biggest things I brought into my routine in the past 6 months has been starting my day with something difficult. Trying to avoid my phone and telling the truth, it's something that I've let creep back into my life in the past month or so, is going on my phone, and it delays me getting to the gym. But seeing just going and doing something difficult to start your day, it armours your mind and it makes you think the rest of the day like, I'm ready for the day, rather than kind of slogging into your day. If you get something done difficult, get outside. It could be a short run, going to the gym. It could be getting a wee bit of work done at the beginning of the day, but you need to get done. It armours your mind for the day ahead. And I feel that's such an important takeaway from that. Another thing, which I actually learned from a coach that I worked with before, who was a mental health and wellbeing coach, and it is approach difficulty with intention. That's how I've worded it. Goggins says, know why you're in the fight to stay in the fight. So I used to go to these sessions through ice baths, and what the coach would always say to me is, he'd always say, like, have an intention. Why are you going in this today? Because what happens when you get in an ice bath is it's fucking horrible. Like, your body is telling you to get out of there. Your mind is telling you get out of there. So you need to have it very clear why you're going in that ice bath. Like, what is your intention? Are you trying to rid your mind of stress? Are you trying to improve yourself by X, Y, and Z? What is your reasoning for going in there? Because if you don't have a strong reasoning for doing something, see when it gets difficult and that thought creeps into your head, why am I doing this? You're going to stop doing it. So again, approach difficulty with intention. Why are you doing these things? That's why some people can persist through difficult things, because they have a clear reason why. They have clear intention to it. And I think that's a really important takeaway for moments of struggle. Now, the next one is one of the biggest changes you can make in life. And this is what Goggins says. He says, people will change their hairstyle, their house, their partners, but they never change the way they think in life. They never change one of the most important things to us, which is our mindset and attitude towards pain, discomfort, and growth. And it's so true. People change their haircuts, people change their house, people change their partners. All these things are really important things. They're huge things. But they never change the way they perceive pain, difficulty. They close their mind off to it. Whereas if you can open your mind up to change and how you perceive difficulty, pain, all these things, you're going to grow and improve so much. And that's not just physically what you can do with your body, what you can do with your mind, how you can endure difficulty with relationships in your career, physically, emotionally. All these things will get better if you open your mind to that. And again, it's something that so many people don't change. They get stuck in this narrow-minded way of thinking about the world. But if you change that, it is one of the biggest things that you can change in your life, the way that you perceive the world. The last one I'm going to leave you with from Goggins is what he believes is the problem in today's world. And he says, we are programmed to seek discomfort to numb out the pain. We consume media that confirms our beliefs. We have hobbies aligned with our talents. We spend as little time as possible doing things we hate, which makes us soft. So we're programmed to seek discomfort to numb out pain. So when people go through difficulty in life, they seek out comforts, which inevitably actually make it worse. They don't make it any better. We consume media that confirms our belief, which makes us narrow-minded. So if you believe something, you'll find a little video or a Wikipedia page to support that. That's confirmation bias. And you'll be closed-minded from there. So we need to open our minds up to actually what's possible. We have hobbies that are aligned with our talents. So we only do things we're good at. So we don't get much better. We don't get better being uncomfortable. And we spend as little time as possible doing things we hate, which he believes makes us soft, which I completely agree with. So basically everything I got from there is that we are designed to seek comfort. We seek comfort in life, and that keeps us in the same position where we often don't want to be. Whereas if we get uncomfortable, we do things that challenge us, that's how we get somewhere where we want to be. Okay, so that's the big powerful thing that I took from David Goggins' book. Now, with all of these things that I spoke about today, these are some incredible lessons that I've learned, and these are some of the best books that I've learned. If you want to know more of the books that I've read or listened to that I think are incredible and I recommend to everybody, I have a self-improvement reading list, which I'll give you for free. If you just DM me, just ask it, hey man, can I have your reading list? Whatever, just message me anything. I'll send it across to you. It's free. It just gives you a list of some of the best books that I've read, a little bit on them, what I think about them, and where you can go and buy them from there. So if you're just getting involved with self-improvement, you're not sure where to start, you don't know what books are good or bad, you want some advice from me, just ask me for that link. I'll send you it for free, and it'll give you a list of books. You can choose one and you can get on with it. Because to finish for today, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Socrates, one of my favourite quotes, and to me, it explains why reading is such a vital part of what we should do within self-improvement. And Socrates said, employ your time in improving yourself by reading other men's writings so that you gain easily through what others have laboured hard for. So literally what he's saying there is, employ your time in improving yourself by reading other people's writings, because see, all the smartest people that have ever lived, they've wrote something. Nowadays they've recorded videos. You can consume the knowledge that they've spent years and years and years to acquire. You can find that knowledge online. You can find it through books. They've laboured so hard. They've worked so hard for that knowledge. You can consume it. You can get it by reading. Like, what's more powerful than that? Reading is one of the most powerful things you can do for self-improvement and just in life in general. Now, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. As ever, if you have, please rate this podcast if you can on Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like. Drop me a DM with any thoughts you have, because it really, really does help me push out new content and realise what you do like to listen to. But as ever, I hope you've learned something from this podcast, and I hope you can apply it to your own pursuit of constant improvement. Thank you for listening.